Welcome back everybody to my review series titled Love Hurts. I'm on episode 7, I believe. Today's film is actually the 4th film in a movie franchise. It was a film that originally I thought, oh yeah, it's decent, and then like rewatching it again for this, it's like, you know, this movie actually is decently funny. By no means is it a comedy. There was a lot of dark humor that I completely forgot about in the film, and it's made for a little bit more of an enjoyable film because this was one of 2 films in that franchise that were kind of on the lower end. So the film I'm going to be talking about is Bride of Chucky. In case you need a little refresher on the Child's Play franchise and you don't know what this film is about, for 10 years the tortured soul of serial killer Charles Lee Ray has been imprisoned inside a child's doll. Chucky is reborn when his old flame, Tiffany, played by Jennifer Tilly, and it gets way more confusing in the follow-up to this movie, but I'll save that for another time. She rescues his battered doll parts from a police impound, but Chucky wants his new playmate cut down to size, so he transforms his blushing bride into a stunning little terror, the one you see on the cover. Chucky and Tiffany can't wait to start their own homicidal honeymoon when this demonic duo hits the road, hooks up with a pair of unsuspecting newlyweds. They leave a trail of murder and mayhem behind them. A little bit of backstory to the franchise. This film is one of the 2 weird ones, with the other one being Seed of Chucky. With Bride of Chucky, the opening picks up after Child's Play 3, and small spoiler alert for that film, Chucky gets thrown into this giant fan and then gets ripped to shreds. The scene showcases and references a lot of famous horror icons and stuff like that. To catch all of them, you gotta watch it yourself because they pack a lot into it, and I'm sure there'd be some that I miss. Framing of the film I felt was surprisingly good for a film that I don't think was really well received by fans or critics, but not 100% sure on that one. I love the soundtrack. It's got like a heavy rock metal vibe to it. A good horror movie, one I absolutely love, has that kind of soundtrack. Now I guess I don't have it on my DVD stand there. Oh, it's over here. So another one that has a soundtrack that I absolutely love is Demon Knight, and I'll get to that one someday. 80s and 90s horror films, the soundtracks were really good. Like the ones I've seen, the ones that just go through like the drive-in type feel, like go over the top, comedy, gore, whatever, always seem to have like a hard rock metal soundtrack, which I absolutely loved. Freddy vs. Jason is kind of like that as well. I think you kind of get the vibe of horror films that I love the most, like drive-in stuff. You can eat popcorn to, entertained, you can laugh, be scared, all that stuff. Title sequence of the restoration of the Chucky doll is a great bridge between the opening scene where Tiffany kills the cop to get the parts of Chucky and the rest of the film. It was a great way to bridge it without like breaking from the movie, and it fit really well. And that's another thing that I love about some horror films, is they have that title sequence. We don't find that nowadays in films, but like that title sequence where it adds a bit more to the film. To find one that just bridges a cold open with the rest of the film is also something that's kind of hard to find. Another thing about the title sequence is you could say it's also a callback to Child's Play 2, where the opening of the film was literally just them remolding Chucky. Because if you've seen the first Child's Play, he gets badly burned, melted, I think. Or maybe that's the second one. He gets melted in the opening for the second film, that's what it is. The cinematography of this film is really cool. One scene in particular that I really liked was there's a dolly zoom shot where it zooms in and the camera's moving back at the same time, and it creates this really cool effect on the footage, and it's in the ritual scene. I forget if dolly zoom is the proper title for that filmmaking technique, but it's a technique that's just really cool. Another highlight of the film, as with all the Child's Play films, Brad Dourif, who plays Chucky, his delivery of the lines is really awesome, and it's always darkly funny and just makes for an even more entertaining film. One of the cool things is, I don't know if it was just the newer ones or if he did it with the older ones, but he pre-recorded all his lines, and then the lines came through the doll so that the actors had something to interact with. Like, maybe that's what they did in earlier films, but that's a technique that I don't think many filmmakers actually use for like these puppet stuff. It just works so well, and I remember reading something on one of the newer films, watching it behind the scenes, when the Chucky doll was on set and it was delivering these lines, it scared the crap out of it. His delivery of it and the fact it was coming through a doll, it's like, that'd be pretty freaky to anybody that encounters that. Some of the other stuff that the puppeteer actually worked on, like I found he worked on Bride of Chucky, and I was talking to him about my favorite show of all time, Freaky Stories. There was like one question on it, and if I remember correctly, it was, how was the experience different between working on, well, a kid show and a very adult movie? Well, not that adult, but you get what I mean. Now, I can't really remember what his answer was because that was like 4 years ago. Yeah, it was definitely a fun time meeting him. The special effects are well done for the film. Like, I wasn't really expecting the film to be as good as it was. Going back into it, like I've seen it before, it was definitely better than I actually remember. One of the interesting things about the film is it's got some meta elements to it. Like, I think it was a knife or something, and Tiffany's got a knife, and then Chucky said, oh, that's so cliche, and then it's like, it was something along those lines where Tiffany had something and then Chucky said one of his classic one-liners, and the weapons that they use in the film are references to classic horror films. There's a scene where a character has a bunch of nails in his head. That's obviously a clear reference to the next film I'm going to review. Some of the kills are references to classic films and stuff like that, and overall it was just it was almost, I guess you could say it was a spoof film while not being a spoof film of like classic horror films. Basically, it spoofed classic horror films while telling an original story without rehashing those films like most of the spoof films. It's definitely more of a comedy and definitely along the spoof lines than it is an actual horror film. But there's still some horror elements to it. You can't have a Chucky movie without some horror elements. It's decently written. Like, I don't think there was any issues I had with dialogue. Maybe for some of the human characters, but at the same time, it was well written. Clearly, Tiffany and Chucky had the better lines, and that was the intention. I do remember now that there was a scene that I felt wasn't really necessary, and it was very early on in the film. I basically could have done without that, but at the same time it kind of set up another story. For me, at least, rewatching it just felt kind of out of place. Didn't really make sense because we didn't know who the characters were, and it kind of just jumped into this second story like after the whole Tiffany thing, and it's like, okay. So I probably could have done without that, but Despite that, I wouldn't say that the film was over-edited. Clearly they had to have that to set up a couple of characters, which was, overall it was well edited. I found it almost had like a cold kind of look to it, kind of almost a bluish tint, which was really cool. Interesting look for it, but it was a good film. It's a solid 8. If it wasn't as entertaining as it was, it probably would have been so much lower. You could even push for an 8.5, but I think I'm gonna stick with an 8. Recommend it if you haven't seen it. You can get it everywhere, pretty much. If you like this review, be sure to give it a like and subscribe, and stay tuned for the next one. See ya.